Well, good morning. Today is the last Sunday of the year, which means this is also our last report for 2015. We have an interesting show planned for you, and it starts right now.
From TV6, this is the Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, our guest this morning is Thomas Zurbuchen, a professor of aerospace and engineering and space scientist at the University of Michigan. Professor Zurbuchen has also served as the Associate Dean of Entrepreneurial Programs in the College of Engineering and the founding director of the Center for Entrepreneurship at the U of M. He serves on the boards of 3 small companies and nonprofits and was appointed by Governor Snyder to Northern Michigan University's Board of Trustees. He's been at the University of Michigan for over 16 years. Welcome to the Ryan Report.
Thank you so much for having me, Don.
Nice to have you with us.
Glad to be.
As I understand, you grew up in Switzerland.
Yes, I grew up in a town of about 500 people, up in the mountains in Switzerland. All farmers, many more cows than people.
Really?
Yeah, exactly.
And you actually stayed in Switzerland. You received, I think, through your graduate degree at universities in Switzerland.
Exactly right. So I'm a product of public education. I went to the small town school for 4 years, then down to the lake each day. I went by foot and then by bicycle, down to the lake for the next 5, and then up to the next level all the way to the PhD. I went to a small regional university, not unlike Northern Michigan Tech,
Okay.
and got the degrees there.
And did you always have an interest in space as you were growing up, or is this something that came later in life?
You know, at 6th grade or so, I took over the library in my school. I volunteered for that, and I started reading sections. So there are 2 sections that I was really interested in. The first one was history, especially history of exploration, you know, whether it's Columbus or whether it's Galileo, or like people who figured things out, and science. I never thought of me as a scientist. I didn't know a scientist, but I loved physics, I loved chemistry, I loved biology. So I was really interested in that, yes.
Okay, you came to the United States. What made you decide to come here?
So I won an award after my PhD from the government of Switzerland for a good PhD, or one of the best PhDs of that year. And I wanted to come to a place in the US or in the UK to learn English better and also do research. I thought I'm only coming for a year. That's the length of the award, and I got stuck in Michigan. I joined a really famous researcher at the University of Michigan, Professor Len Fisk, who ran NASA science for many years.
So are you a permanent resident now, or?
I'm a citizen. For over 10 years, a U.S. citizen. I'm married to a musician from Chicago originally. I have 2 children in Ann Arbor.
What do you plan to discuss with the group at the Economic Club? What's the story you're here to tell?
You know, the topic I was asked to talk about really relates to the relationship of universities and economic development. A relationship that has many different tiers. You know, the 2 things I really want to talk about is, if you want your students, your graduates, to be part of economic development, how do you have to teach them? So that's the first one. And the second tier is, as a university, as an institution, what are the things we can do to really help stimulate economic growth and enable entrepreneurial thinking in a way that really benefits the community? So it's really those 2 aspects.
You know, this is probably an unfair comment I'm going to make. We tend to look at engineers as very science-oriented, but not necessarily entrepreneurial. But that's not the case, is it? In fact, you're proposing they have to be more entrepreneurial to be successful.
Absolutely. I mean, so for me, see, entrepreneurship and the word entrepreneurial really means more than starting a business.
Right.
See, entrepreneurship really is that skill set and that mindset that lets a person, whether that person is an English major or an engineer or a medical doctor or a business major, it makes that person not only think of new ideas, identify opportunities for new ideas, but it really makes that person say, what can I do about it? I will now act on this idea. I will build a team and I will move these ideas forward. That's what entrepreneurship is about, and that's how we should teach.
And you actually formed 2 organizations at the University of Michigan. Was this kind of a learning experience for you as well?
Oh, it always is, right? So the way I got asked to form these organizations, I always taught that way. See, I built space instruments, and I taught how to, in fact, build spacecraft. to our students. But I found it really difficult to motivate the students for these tasks if I made up the ideas. So I worked with Google, for example, and said, hey, what are the space instruments that you're interested in? What do you want to do? Google said, we want to image the Earth once every year for Google Earth or other applications. It's like, how would you do that? So I brought that into my classroom and we started working on that. See that entrepreneurial kind of thought process that we really started talking about. So there's a customer, there's a clientele out there. It's not just my idea. It's not just what I teach in a classroom. It's how you put it together to a greater whole. And so I was asked to, in fact, create programs that really are encompassing all majors across the University of Michigan to do these kind of activities. English majors, arts majors, medical students, engineers, and so forth.
And I think the University of Michigan is being recognized as one of the schools that's doing very well in this area.
We are now. So we are in the graduate programs in entrepreneurship, we're ranked third, and at the undergrad we're ranked seventh. If you look back 10 years, we were not ranked at all. And so basically, we've really come up that way. That gives you a lot of hope, of course. You look at the university like Northern with opportunities that are here, Michigan Tech, just doing great things up. And so for us, you know, at Northern, we're going to have the same kind of thought process. Who do we want to be? What does entrepreneurship mean for us? And how do we enable that in our students?
Okay, I want to pursue this further. We'll have to get back to some more questions. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Our guest this morning is University of Michigan Professor Thomas Zurbuchen. I read one of your posts and it said, if it's not exploration or innovation, I'm usually not too interested in getting involved. Does that kind of give us a good picture of who you are?
Yeah, it probably is. You know, I just really love pushing the envelope, and both exploration and innovation do that. You know, in the case of exploration, it's about learning new things, kind of enabling, kind of, if we know everything that we know, we put it in a circle. What exploration is it's breaking out of that circle, making the circle bigger, you know, learning new things. And innovation, of course, is, you know, learning how to do new things, things that are enabling opportunities and are creating value in many different dimensions.
You know, there's the expression thinking out of the box, but I guess I've always felt we don't think far enough out of that box. We have to break that box pretty wide open to get some new innovation and new exciting discoveries.
I totally agree. And you know, even more so today, right? I mean, the one thing that's really clear from history and from our data that we have on technologies, for example, is that the time between new waves, new inventions of technologies is shrinking. So in other words, the big, like it used to be that there was one major transformation in a lifetime. Now there's 5 or 6,
right.
And it's speeding up. So learning how to deal with these changes is just such an important part of education.
I love to tell young people, including my grandchildren, you know, for me the telephone was hooked to the wall with a wire, and now I carry a telephone, mini computer, camera, all kinds of things in my pocket. I never would have imagined that. I think that's, you know, where do we go from here? You know, we can't really imagine what those things are.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's one of the aspects of innovation. It's really hard to predict the big things. What's always easy to predict or easier to predict is the small things. So some of these also seem big, but you know, I would predict that on a time scale of 5 to 10 years, your car will make a lot of decisions that you currently make. For example, the car will make a decision not to hit a tree if you drive up to it. Okay. It basically will stop you. Well, why do I know? We already have the technologies. There's some car manufacturers that are already doing it. It sounds still pretty crazy, but we're getting there. Well, but what will really happen? You know, how does a person in a wheelchair get to the hospital during that time? How do cars drive? Like, how do I commute? How do I get to work? It's not clear at all, because there's many inventions that have to happen to answer these questions and do it in a way that really is transformative. We just don't have the basis for that discussion.
And many of these things we have today were created by very entrepreneurial people. Steve Jobs would be, I guess, the best example.
Oh, yeah.
But we need more of those people, don't we?
Exactly
and that's
right.
what you're kind of about.
Exactly right. And so I really believe there's 2 aspects to that. So you have these alpha entrepreneurs, whether they're Steve Jobs, whether they're, you know, builders of new companies that really see the future that nobody else sees. So you have those. The second thing we need is a body of workforce, students, graduates that recognize this. So they basically say, over there is somebody building a great idea. Let's jump on board. And we want to help that out. These ideas, by the way, they come in all sizes. There's a number of these ideas right up here in Marquette that are really big ideas, or potentially big ideas. Sometimes it takes a little bit of luck for them to really go big, but that motion, that recognizing, oh, there's an innovator, let's go join. This is going to be big. That's a skill set that we really need to teach as well.
Would it be fair to say that many of the innovations have come out of the space programs?
There's a number of innovations coming out of the space program that relate to clothing, that relate to propulsion, that relate to materials, and so forth. Many come from that. Many others come from entirely different programs, right? The internet came out of the military, and it came out of energy. If you look, many of the standards came out of energetic particle physics. It's like, wow, how do they relate? Well, these people, these innovators, solve problems that were really, really hard, where the solutions that they were given at that point were not possible, they were not sufficient. So they had to reinvent, they had to leap beyond. And so yes, the space program is such a piece. I think there's many opportunities for innovation that relate to the environment, to resources, and so forth.
Are you concerned by the fact that the U.S. appears to be cutting back on its commitment to space exploration?
Yeah, I am concerned about this, and I'm concerned really at two levels. The first one is the question you should ask: do we have the most ambitious, the most interesting and important space exploration program right now? And the answer probably to that question is we're doing some really interesting things, but probably not. And then the other question is, why do we stop support? Why do we slow support? And of course, that's a cycle, right? It goes back and forth. Like, you do less, you play it more safe, and you cut down a little bit more, and so forth. If you look at basic numbers on the research side, which is where I'm working, the funding over the last 10 years have been approximately constant. So it hasn't been cut in a large percentage fraction. But I think the biggest challenge, I would say, is that as a nation, we're really struggling to find the purpose of that program. So really to elevate the visibility and elevate the thinking and the innovative ambitions, that's what we're currently struggling with.
Okay. You were also appointed by Governor Snyder to serve on the NMU Board of Trustees. We're going to talk about that when we come back. Back with more on the Ryan Report after this break. Again, our guest this morning is Professor Thomas Zurbuchen of the University of Michigan, also serving on the NMU Board of Trustees in Marquette County, to talk to the Economic Club. You're serving on the Board of Trustees. You're an educator yourself. Does that give you some different perspectives as you sit in those board meetings?
I think it probably does. I think of faculty. There's such a large fraction of a large part of what the university is about, any university, right? Their faculty. I think of them not just as people that I don't have a relation to. I understand their work inside and out, how they stand in the classroom, how it feels to grade finals. I know those things because I do them and I did them.
Institutions like colleges, universities can also be difficult to change. Might you experience some frustration if you don't see that change happening in a place like Northern, where obviously you're a great advocate for entrepreneurialism, and how is that going to apply as you go forward in this assignment?
So first of all, I've worked in many universities, and I'm very much aware of the fact that universities don't change on their own. There's a joke that people are making, and it says, how many professors does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is change. so that, like, many academics like that joke because they know what it means. Universities are built to have longevity in it. That's a good thing. Now, what happens, of course, is because of these tasks that are being asked of us, the educational objectives that we talked about, universities need to adapt. And whenever there's change of a big organization, there is some frustration. Frustration in this case, what I would say, is just kind of the feeling of we really want to change and we need to figure out how to do that. That's the same at Michigan, University of Michigan. It's the same at Northern Michigan University. It's very common, very much aware of that.
Northern's had some problems with declining enrollment. Not Northern alone. Many universities of its size experience the same problem. I believe they mentioned something like 45,000 less students to draw upon in the area in the Midwest they draw upon. Is becoming the entrepreneurial university one of the answers to restoring the enrollment at the university at Northern?
I really believe that an engaged university in its community is a university that is a really attractive place to go to. Because see, you come to the university and we teach you the big concepts. We read Shakespeare with you. We still believe in the value of a liberal arts education and the critical thinking that comes from that. But at the same time, we want to engage you in work, in businesses here, by volunteering in hospitals, in hospices, and so forth. We want you to get that experience. That's a much more attractive place to go to than a place that's isolated within walls and only looks inwards.
Northern's developing a new strategic plan. From what you've seen so far, does that appear to be on track?
I believe that it's not only on track, but it's pointing exactly in the right direction. It's pointing in a direction of innovation and reinvention, which is exactly what we're talking about here. It's a plan that sees Northern as part of its community and actively seeks to address issues that are here, not just in Marquette, but in the entire UP. And Northern asks, how can we be of most value here? By solving that problem, by being excellent at this, by becoming the best Northern it can be, we will solve the enrollment problem because we become a great university.
You said at the beginning that universities becoming more involved in economic development was a key. How can they do that? What do they have to do to meet that challenge?
I really believe that there's at least two ways of doing that. The first one relates to education. Innovation is a liberal arts value. We need to teach our students the value of thinking new thoughts, the value of stepping out of the comfort zone and how it feels to do that. We can accompany them through research programs. We can do that through programs that focus on entrepreneurial entities, for example, new inventions. We can do that as educators. The second piece is really one of partnership. And it basically makes the university ask, how can we be part of that ecosystem? The university is not the only ecosystem. It's not isolated from its environment. It is part of the environment, the economic environment. So the university can ask, how can we do that? We could build programs like Invent at NMU, right, which takes products forward, kind of taking advantage of both the educational mission of the university, but also grows ideas. There's many such programs that we could run out of the business school, but across the board.
Now, I think these universities in the UP, like Northern and Michigan Tech, have been very community-oriented, and I think that's very helpful.
Yes, I agree. This is not something that's hard to preach. I think that, and I really believe it's coming inside out. Faculty really believe in that too. They want to be relevant here. They love this community. They love the UP. They want to help it. So there's important challenges that are out here that education can address, and the faculty really want to do that.
Okay. There's a lot more we could talk about, but we've run out of time. Thanks very much for coming in to joining us this morning. Appreciate your being on the show.
Thank you, Don. Really appreciate it.
I'll be back with some final thoughts after we take this break. When I was a junior in high school, I developed a real interest in presidential politics. Wasn't really a partisan, but I enjoyed the spirited action. It was a different era. Television was in its infancy, and people depended on network radio for their national news. It was also a time when there were fewer primary elections, and many of the states came to the conventions with their delegates uncommitted, which led to multiple rounds of delegate balloting, all covered from gavel to gavel by the major radio networks. I remember 1956 very well. The Republicans would nominate Dwight Eisenhower for a second term, but the excitement was on the Democratic side, where it came down to a battle at the convention between former Illinois Governor Adlai Stevenson, who was the party's nominee in 1952, and Tennessee Senator Estes Kefauver. Stevenson won, which set up a wide-open battle with multiple ballots cast for vice president that was eventually won by Kefauver. I spent many hours listening to the radio as it all played out. Well, this history lesson was all intended as an introduction to what I really wanted to say today, which is that I went from being someone who for many years loved following presidential politics to someone who now would rather just turn it all off. Why? Well, for one thing, it never stops. About 6 months after we pick a president, it seems to start all over again. It would be okay if we just ignored it, but the cable news channels and major networks are there to cover it every day. It's almost like it's become a sport. ESPN and others cover major sporting events every day with commentary and reports, and the news channels do the same with the presidential competition. Consider this. Since last summer, about 25 Republicans and Democrats have been running for President of the United States. Some have fallen by the wayside, but there must still be 17 or 18 left in the race. Before this year ends, the Republican presidential candidates will have held 5 debates and the Democrats at least 2. And yet, the election is still over 10 months away. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but while all this was going on, the people in Canada held an election that by their standards was considered long. It lasted 78 days. That's right, 78 days. That's less than 3 months from beginning to end. And get this, it's the longest in their history. And this was a major election as they selected a new leader equivalent to our president to head up their government. Now, I'm not suggesting the United States should model itself after Canada. It's a very nice country, but we all have our own cultures and traditions. But if Canada can select a new leader in 78 days, do we really need to have presidential election campaigns that last for almost a year and a half? Or as I suggested, that often start as soon as the last one is completed? I'm not proposing any changes, just blowing off steam, I guess. No one is going to listen anyway. The bottom line is, if you think you've heard a lot of presidential politics already, the fact is, as they say, you ain't heard nothing yet. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Well, thanks for joining us this morning, and thanks also to Professor Zurbuchen for being here to share some very interesting thoughts. Just a reminder that if you miss our show, you can also catch it on the internet. Go to uppermichigansource.com and click on the Features tab. And if you have some thoughts you want to share, you can send an email to the Ryan Report at chesstv.com. It's a few days early, but this is my last chance to extend my wishes to all of you for a very happy new year. Hope you have a wonderful year coming up. It's been great being back here this year, and I especially want to thank those who have offered kind words of encouragement and support. They're always nice to hear. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hope it's a good week, and that you'll join us again next Sunday morning.